Good evening and welcome to Conservation Conversations presented by the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. My name is Kevin Kelly and I'm joined again tonight by co-host Gabe Jenkins. Gabe, Earth Day, happy Earth Day to you. How are you?
Thank you, Kevin. Doing very well tonight. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Couldn't be better, that's for sure.
Well, you've already kind of kicked it off. Today is Earth Day. And, as we think about how we celebrate the earth and make sure we take care of it, for us, it was extremely applicable to highlight some of the programs that some folks really might not even really be aware that Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife does and what we manage and oversee. So I'm really excited to highlight some of the programs that we do at the department. A lot of times people just look at us as Fish and Wildlife, the agency that does hunting and fishing species management, but we're so much more than that. So I think for a lot of our folks, you would be enlightened to see what we offer and all the different suite of biologists and teams of people that we have working on on animals that we do not traditionally hunt or fish.
Yeah, and we've got two great guests tonight that we'll introduce here in just a second. But before we do, we want to remind everybody out there watching tonight that we'll be taking questions. So go ahead and ask your questions in the little chat function off to the right there, and we'll try to get them at the end of our episode. But Gabe, who do we have tonight?
So tonight we're going to be highlighting our Kentucky Wild program. From our agency, we will have Laura Burford and Michaela Rogers. Both of them work out of the wildlife division. The Kentucky Wild program, we're going to get into that, really discuss it and highlight it. It's a program that the entire agency is involved in, whether you're in marketing, wildlife, information, education, we all have a say in it, but Laura and Michaela play a very vital role in that program, and we're excited to have them come on tonight, talk about the program specifically, and then the different things they do within the department. So welcome tonight, and we'll just kind of kick it off with you guys and let you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do with the department, and some of your interests there. So we'll start with you if you don't mind.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michaela Rogers. I am an environmental scientist, and I'm in the Wildlife Diversity Division for the department. I have been with the department for the past 3 years, or it'll be 3 years this June. And then before that, I also worked as a 9-month seasonal for the department, just to kind of give you a little bit of my background with the department. And then some of the projects I work on here, I am our main point person for monarch and pollinator conservation. So the Kentucky Monarch Conservation Plan that we'll be talking about tonight. But I also work with a variety of at-risk species. So bats, I do some hellbender work, some of our crayfish projects, kind of a wide variety, but most people here think of me as kind of our monarch and pollinator coordinator.
Right. So one thing I'll point out, you said the Wildlife Diversity Program. You've touched on some of those. Kind of name off a few other things that you guys work on with the other host of biologists that kind of falls in that purview, if you don't mind, Michaela.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple people that work on bats there. There are several people that work on our non-game songbirds. There is a herpetologist who works on some of our reptiles or many of our reptiles and amphibians in the state. There's been a lot of work on, or a little bit of work starting to come through on crayfish, and then a little bit of small mammal work as well. So kind of, again, a wide variety of different biologists that are working in that program.
Gotcha. Awesome. I just wanted to make sure everybody kind of knew what that meant, what all different species that might fall into it. So thanks again for coming on. Michaela, we're looking forward to chatting with you some. So Laura, tell us a little bit about yourself too as well.
Hi. Okay, great. Yeah, my name's Laura Burford, and I am a career fish and wildlife employee in Kentucky. I have been here since 1994, and I started right out of college. My very first job with the agency was as a fish and wildlife technician on the peregrine falcon reintroduction program. So I started as a hack site attendant. I was feeding quail to little baby falcon chicks. So fun job. It kind of went up from there. I ended up coordinating the falcon reintroduction program, and we did that for several years, releasing falcons at different locations in central Kentucky. I went on and became a senior wildlife biologist it was then called the non-game program, kind of the same animal groups that Michaela was talking about. I am a certified wildlife biologist with the Wildlife Society, and I went on to work in that program for about 10 years, working with raptors, setting up also some songbird monitoring stations and our survey routes. But then I made a little bit of a career move, because one of the things I love about working with wildlife is having the chance to talk with people about it and doing presentations and education. So I jumped over to our information and education division and eventually became an assistant director there. And I worked with a lot of the conservation education programs in the schools, and also the camping program, hunter ed, and archery in the schools. But I guess at my heart, I'm a wildlife biologist. And so when the agency teed up the Kentucky Wild Program, I felt like it was marrying two of my favorite things, which are non-game wildlife and education. And so bang, I came right back. And so over the past 3 years, I've been working as part of the Kentucky Wild team.
Gotcha.
Dang. Well, I think we were gonna dive into Kentucky Wild and kind of explain to folks what it is, and it hasn't been around too terribly long, correct, Laura?
That is correct. Kentucky Wild as a program has only been around about 3 years. We'll celebrate our third anniversary, if you will, in June. We started in June of 2018. But Kentucky Wild in name is something new. But I will tell you that from the standpoint of, when I started my career, we were always hoping to have something like this. If you live in Kentucky, and, I'm from Kentucky, I've lived here my whole life, that Kentucky has a wide variety of wildlife. And that's because we have such great different habitat, whether you're talking about wetlands in the western part of the state, all the way to eastern Kentucky. And, maybe you like bull elk, maybe you like watching songbirds in your backyard. We have a lot to offer. And the great thing about it is that on Earth Day, we can kind of celebrate that, because not everybody enjoys wildlife the same way. Some people enjoy hunting and angling, and they enjoy putting food on the table for their families. But we also know that some people like putting up birdhouses in their backyard, or maybe they just like going camping or hiking and enjoying wildlife in all these different ways. But I think the thing we need to remember is that wildlife truly belongs to all of us. I mean, it is a resource that belongs to the citizens of Kentucky. And, in that we have some responsibility to take care of what we've been given, and make sure that generations after us can have the same enjoyable experience to enjoy our wildlife resources. And Fish and Wildlife agencies have this awesome responsibility to be stewards of the wildlife on behalf of the citizens of Kentucky. And, you mentioned this earlier kind of in the intro, but a lot of people think Kentucky Fish and Wildlife equals game species. And yes, it does. We are very proud of our hunting and our angling resources that we have, and the things that licensed dollars have been able to do. But there are a team of wildlife professionals that work on these other species that make up the 90% of all the other creatures out there, like bats and freshwater mussels and small fishes and salamanders, snakes, birds of prey, songbirds, butterflies. All of those pieces are important, and they're all intertwined. And so just like hunters and anglers know that when they buy their hunting or fishing license, they're supporting these game management activities, Kentucky Wild was created as a membership program for folks that want to support the other conservation efforts that are happening for these other species. And that's not to say that if you're a hunter or angler, you can't be part of Kentucky Wild. That is actually just the opposite. About 75% of our Kentucky Wild members are also licensed buying hunters and anglers. So we know that our sportsmen and women in Kentucky understand the value of all of those pieces. And Kentucky Wild was born out of a need to expand our partnership to those folks that aren't traditional users.
I was going to say it's kind of a tall order for us in Kentucky. You talked about all the species that we have, but we're blessed with that. But it also becomes a challenge that, we have. When you look at species diversity as a state, we're one of the highest states in the country. When you look at how we are from east to west, from the mountains to the swamps and wetlands and all the different creatures that inhabits, it has a lot of different animals for us to have management over and oversight. So, it's a challenge for us where some states don't have near the species that we have. So, like I said, we're more than just, deer and turkeys, but it's hellbenders or monarchs and things like that. So, and not all of them live here in Kentucky all the time. And that makes a challenge. I know Michaela will talk about that some too, but we have species that pass through, and we're very, very important migration route through if you're a songbird or a pollinator. So a lot of challenges for us that we think about 365 days of the year in a variety of different ways.
And I'm sure it makes you, Laura and Michaela, I'm sure it makes your job one of the most interesting in the world. I'm fascinated. I mean, you could be going out, surveying bats one day and then misnetting songbirds the next. And, I mean, it's just incredible. We talk about wildlife diversity, but the diversity in your roles has to make it really satisfying as a professional to be able to do that.
It absolutely does. I mean, I'm a little bit further along in my career than Michaela is. We won't count the years at this point. But when I started with the agency, there were 0 peregrine falcon nests in the state. There were 0, and now we're finding them on bridges and buildings, and even some that are nesting on cliffs. When I started with the agency, I think there was 1 bald eagle nest that was kind of iffy. It was off and on again in Western Kentucky. And now we're knocking on the door of 200 nesting territories for bald eagles. So to be able to have the perspective of looking back when there were none and now seeing how far we've come and how well good conservation works, knowing that is encouraging. And it is very fulfilling from a career perspective.
Definitely keeps us busy as well. One day you're out looking for bats, another day you might be doing, monarch vegetation monitoring or something, and the next you might need to go out and find crayfish. So there's always a variety.
It's fantastic.
So you guys have kind of highlighted the things that you do. Let's kind of get back to the program itself in Kentucky Wild. So we kind of hit the highlights of what it is. Tell me a little bit more about the structure and what it actually would mean to be a member of Kentucky Wild and what that looks like.
Sure. Well, we kind of have 2 tracks with Kentucky Wild. We have one that we call it our sponsorship, and that's mainly geared towards business or industry, small companies that would like to get on board and sponsor some of the work that we're doing. We have some fantastic sponsors, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them later. But the other track that we have for membership is for individuals to join us. And we have 6 membership levels for people to join. And no matter what membership that you join at, what level, all of our members receive quarterly newsletters that highlight some of the programs we have going on, tell you about our staff. We highlight some Kentucky Wild members and what they do to enjoy the outdoors here in Kentucky. Every year we produce an annual report showing you how we've been good stewards of your membership money that's come to us. And different membership levels have different a swag that goes with them, like these totally awesome green t-shirts that we're all wearing that say I support wildlife. All of the levels have a different thing, but probably one of the most exciting part, I think definitely my favorite part, is that one of the things we do for our members is that once a month we will set up an invitation or an opportunity to go out and help us do work in the field. So we give our members the opportunity to come out and do work. It's not something we stage or set up. It's like, no, you're coming into the field. You might get wet. You might need to bring a raincoat. We might have to postpone a couple of times. But when you're out there, we're going to put you to work. And that's something we try to do once a month. And as you can imagine, we'd love to take everybody. We can't. We have to draw names. But we do try to do that once a month. And COVID slowed us down a bit because obviously safety had to be our top priority. But now as we're still abiding, of course, by the Healthy at Work guidelines, but we have, because our activities are outside, so we can spread out quite a bit. We can invite some of our members to come and help us get really hands-on with the work we do. And just this month, we have been able to come back with 2 Kentucky Wild experiences. We had a songbird nest box build here in Frankfort. And then we also took folks on a reptile and amphibian survey at Green River Wildlife Management Area. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a chance for us to meet our membership, have people that have, similar passions all together, and feel really good about the work we're doing. So I mentioned that we launched in June of 2018. Since that time, we have had members join from just about all of our Kentucky counties, and quite surprisingly, 41 different states, which I'm going to be really honest, I didn't see that coming. In Canada, I can't forget that. We're international. We've had an international
Right.
member. So of course we're going for 50 states. We would love that. But even that said, we have a lot of inaugural members for Kentucky Wild that have repeatedly joined year after year. And we currently have over 3,000 members with new folks joining every day. And I mentioned earlier, a lot of our members are also licensed buyers, and we love that. We love that the sportsmen and women of Kentucky clearly see value in this program and understand just how important it is.
We'll talk more later on in the program about how to join and a special offer. But I mean, if you're a hunter or you're an angler, when you go to buy your license, it's just a real simple click of the box and to become a Kentucky Wild member in it. Obviously, you know, we're going to be hearing more about the work that Laura, Michaela, and other biologists do around the state, but it's real easy when you go to buy your license.
Some of the membership dollars have purchased gear for our section. It's amazing, really. I don't have time to name it all, but we have been able to purchase a centrifuge for the Center for Mollusk Conservation here in Frankfurt. That's extremely important in the work that they do. They have to feed algae to these young mussels that they are growing to restore back into the native mussel beds. So Kentucky Wild Dollars bought that centrifuge. They've bought a water chiller for use in keeping the water at a proper temperature to grow these young mussels. Switching gears, we've purchased kayaks that are used for our prothonotary warbler surveys, and also are just now starting to get some use during our eastern hellbender surveys that Michaela was talking about a bit earlier. We've also had membership dollars purchase mist nets for use during our songbird banding stations, and also for our Indiana bat monitoring that we're doing at different locations in the state. We've purchased specialized nesting cameras, so our avian team can go and check nest sites without disturbing the birds that nest in tree cavities, whether that be warblers or whether it be barn owls. It's not just Wildlife Division too that is part of Kentucky Wild. I do want to mention that we have two outstanding biologists in the Fisheries Division that work entirely on fishes that are not considered sport fish. These biologists are tirelessly working to find species that are very rare and figure out ways that we can enhance their populations. So we have been able to purchase waders for them to do these surveys in these very, very remote streams, looking for things like the Cumberland darter and the Kentucky arrow darter, maybe not as well known, but beautiful, beautiful fishes. And also we've been able to buy equipment for our folks that are going out and doing the habitat work that is so important for so many species, not just one or two, but a suite of species. We've been able to buy the gear that's necessary to do some prescribed fire burns to improve the quality of open habitat for songbirds and pollinators. And pollinators are definitely the focus of a lot of our Kentucky Wild activities because they are found statewide and they need our help statewide. And Michaela is leading the charge on behalf of the agency for this very important group of animals.
So before we get to pollinators, I want to back up just one second and make a point or two. You know, when we think about hunting and fishing, we're comfortable with buying a license and a permit, and then that gives you a privilege to go out and recreate whether you're hunting or fishing. Kentucky Wild is essentially built on that same concept, right? That you have a membership, and then that membership pays for research and in the diversity program, but it also allows you opportunities to get involved. So it's very similar to how we do hunting and fishing licenses and permits. It's just there's not the consumption side of it. It's more of management, monitoring, and then getting you involved. So that's what's really cool about this. And then my second, I guess, would be more of a question is, are there any other programs like this in the country? Do other fish and wildlife agencies have a comparable program? Is this unique? Can you speak to that and what that looks like at the national front with state fish and wildlife agencies?
I can tell you that there's not another program out there exactly like this. I can't speak to all 50 states, but I can count on two hands how many have called to ask about our program. We've had quite a few people that are very, very interested in this model of how this is working. And we love to get feedback from our members. I mean, we are trying to take, as people give us suggestions and comments, we're taking those to heart because the program is growing so quickly and we're excited. We're excited by the enthusiasm. And honestly, it's just been about all positive feedback. I can't think of anything that we've had negative, which is fantastic. But this is a program I think that is really resonating with all Kentuckians, not just our folks that don't hunt or fish, but our hunters and anglers too. And I think it shows that just how valuable our fish and wildlife resources are. And by folks taking interest and not only wanting to financially support the work we're doing, but wanting to know what they can do on their own sphere of influence, what they can do in their own backyards or on lands that they own. It's really encouraging, and we just know it's just going to be growing from here.
Well, and then to kind of wrap this up, it goes to another example of how innovative the Department of Fish and Wildlife is here in Kentucky. I mean, we've talked on this show, Kevin and I have had the abilities to highlight all these different programs where we were the first or we're the only doing these types of things. And then other fish and wildlife agencies are looking at us to model a similar program. So this is yet another example of us thinking outside the box, trying to find ways to engage the people of Kentucky into a different program. So kudos to you guys for doing this and making this available. So I wanted to make sure we pointed that out this evening.
I'd like to jump in real quick. As someone who's not a biologist, hasn't worked at the department for too terribly long, but on the outside looking in, you always, and if you hunt, if you fish, if you enjoy the butterflies and the songbirds, you feel compelled to want to contribute, to want to get involved and help the cause and be a part of this. I mean, you're already invested by whether you buy a hunting or a fishing license or a Kentucky Wild membership, but I encourage people, I mean, this is a fantastic opportunity to really pitch in and help the department, help the biologist, help the wildlife, the habitat. It's just like our Christmas tree recycling program. We see great response to that. And it's evidence that people out there, our viewers probably tonight, are looking for a way to get involved, to connect with our department. And this is just a great way. This program is a great way to do it. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah, sorry. We just have so many points to talk about tonight.
I know.
This is the fun thing. It's such a cool program. But I guess let's transition back to where we were. So we're talking Michaela, I know this is kind of your bread and butter, if you will, for the things that you focus on here with the department. So touch on that, touch on some of the work that you're doing with monarchs, with pollinators. We're using that term pollinator. What does that mean? What are the different species that kind of encompass that? So we'll just kind of kick it over to you right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you mentioned kind of the general term as pollinators, because a lot of people think as pollinators as specifically just bees or butterflies, but a pollinator is really any animal that moves pollen from one plant to another plant, and that helps in plant reproduction. And so there's more than just bees and butterflies that do that. There's also moths, which people don't often remember pollinators, beetles, wasps, some flies, hummingbirds, and then some small mammals can also be considered pollinators. And some of the things that we kind of think about in regards to pollinators, so it's a really hot topic right now. Like, you've probably heard, not just around Earth Day, that pollinators are imperiled. We need to help pollinators. And so it is a topic that's gained a ton of attention, which is great, but people often maybe don't know why that has gained so much attention. And some of the reasons that people are really focused on pollinators right now are because there are kind of widespread declines. And really, especially with bees and butterflies, kind of like we were talking before, but also insects in general, they're facing a lot of threats, which can be related to disease, the increase in pesticide use, and of course, the changing climate. But one of kind of the biggest challenges that all pollinators face is the loss of habitat, where they need nectar resources and they need nesting habitat. And a lot of the habitat that they use is either getting fragmented or developed, and they don't have as much of those valuable nectar resources that they need. And we talk about monarchs a lot just because this is kind of one of our big focal species. It's obviously gotten a ton of attention. The monarch also has kind of an added threat or added threats of having this large migration that it makes every year. And so, they're impacted by some of the issues that I just discussed, but they also have to make this migration. So they can be affected by adverse weather. They can, be hit by cars as they're trying to make their migration. There's really a whole host of different things that contribute to the threats around pollinators.
So kind of get into, I mean, you've painted a nice picture of the issues and some of the concerns with all the pollinators. What exactly do you do with the department, and what's your focus with trying to increase pollinator numbers and your focus there?
Right. So I guess I'll really take it back to the inception of the Monarch Conservation Plan. We have a Kentucky Monarch Conservation Plan. This is my physical copy that I've got with us, but it's also on our website. If you go to the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife website under Wildlife Diversity. And so this was kind of the jumping off point for monarch and pollinator conservation with the department, because around, I think it was the 2015, 2016 mark, a lot of people had been noticing that the monarch butterfly population had been, declining by about 80% over the past 20 or so years. And so, of course, this caused a lot of alarm. And a variety of different stakeholders got together to create the Monarch Conservation Plan. And so, this wasn't just state agencies. It did include us and other state agencies, but it included the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It included private stakeholders, people that are in garden clubs working towards monarch initiatives, people from the agriculture community. So all of these groups came together recognizing that the monarch butterfly needed conservation help, but also, thinking about general pollinator issues as they were writing that plan. And so because the department created that plan, and that's something I mentioned earlier, that when I was a seasonal technician, I actually started working on that then and came back kind of as our main pollinator coordinator a year or so later. And so one of my main focuses and what I do to kind of help pollinator conservation is to implement our monarch conservation plan. And what that means is that there's, all of these stakeholders, there's 6 different sections in the Monarch Conservation Plan. And so I kind of help organize those groups and kind of keep accountability for what's going on to make progress on the different initiatives in the plan. And I will tell you about kind of the contents of the plan to give you an understanding of how it's structured. There's 6 different sections that the groups came up with when they got together to make this plan. So it's education and outreach. So really just getting the word out, similar to what we're doing right now, and trying to, make sure people understand that monarch and pollinators are in decline and that they, need as much help as possible. We also have private and public lands section of the plan. So that is, what can we do? What can others do to directly put habitat out on the landscape that will benefit monarchs and pollinators? We also have our research and monitoring section. So making sure that what we're doing is, hopefully aiding and increasing populations, monitoring the monarchs that, we do see coming through the state. Our right-of-way section in the plan is kind of one that you might not necessarily have thought of, but it's our industries that have power line or gas right of ways, and that's areas that may have just been mowed fescue before. We've been able to work with some partnerships and put pollinator habitat on those areas. And then our funding section of the plan, because of course every initiative that you're going to do at least needs some level of funding. So that kind of gives you a structure of how the plan operates. And so that's my position, really, is helping in all those different sectors and helping our stakeholders to carry out that plan.
So and I see we're both want to talk. So you pollinator habitat. Tell me what that looks like. Are we just talking flowers? Is there any, explain that to our viewers if they're interested in creating something that would be good for pollinators. What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the most important things for creating pollinator habitat is flowers. So if you hear me refer to nectar resources, those are the resources that pollinators, or many pollinators, are using as kind of the food source. And so there's also, bees especially need pollen, and then, things like butterflies, hummingbirds need nectar resources. So just getting more, I mean, it sounds, pretty simple, but just getting more flowers out on the landscape, but not just necessarily any flowers. The most important things that you can provide to pollinators, are things that are grown native and are local to Kentucky, because these are things that all of these pollinators have had access to in the past, so those are going to give them kind of the greatest benefit. Specifically for the monarch butterfly needs milkweed, so that's the only plant that the monarch caterpillar can consume, and the monarch butterfly specifically lays its eggs on that was common milkweed that you all saw the picture of, but any kind of milkweed plant. So having your mix of pollinator or nectar producing species and milkweeds is really important pollinator habitat.
So one thing I think that for our viewers, if it's something that you're interested in doing for pollinator habitat, it's really twofold. You can be active, right, in your plantings and what you put out, but it also, if you've got fields and open spaces, just let nature do what nature does, and don't run your lawnmower. I mean, we've talked about this on some other things, is don't cut the grass, don't brush hog. As much as it feels good and you look what I've done, look how clean it is, but in reality you've taken away that habitat. And by select mowing when you do, to allow those flowers to come up and bloom, I mean, you're benefiting both the monarchs and our pollinators, but other species that depend on that. So that's the cool thing about monarch habitat, is there are a whole suite of other species that benefit, both game and non-game, from that. So a point that I wanted to make sure we drive home is that all kinds of animals flourish when you do something like this.
The one word that has come up in multiple conversations that we've had over the past several weeks is fescue. Fescue. Why is it not good habitat? Laura and Michaela, why don't you explain?
Michaela, I don't want to talk over top you. Go ahead.
Well, it's just that it just doesn't really offer, those nectar resources that we've been talking about. So we're not really at a lack of fescue. It's just that we kind of want to create much more of a diverse native landscape. So something, even if they're just smaller patches of habitat, there are, different native plants that are more useful to the insects and other wildlife that are native to Kentucky. So they'll get a bit more value from something that provides, either those nectar resources or a food source or something like that. And that's going to be much better for your, attracting wildlife to your yard than fescue.
Yeah.
So one thing I'd like to ask, specific to monarchs, is when do we see monarchs here in Kentucky? When do they spend their most time? Explain their migration to me. I think that's a very fascinating part when we say migration, and what people want to think when we say monarch migration and what it really looks like. So if you don't mind, just kind of touch on monarchs specifically, and tell us a little bit about their movement.
Yeah, and like you were talking about, with the monarch butterfly also having habitat that's beneficial to a lot of species, we call the monarch kind of our flagship pollinator. So it's our kind of our poster child. It is this vibrant orange, bright butterfly. Most people have seen one at some point, so it gets everybody really excited. And so it kind of helps to bring people into that pollinator conservation mindset that may not have thought like, oh, well, I'm really interested in bees or something. Bees are great too, but the butterfly draws more people in. And the other thing about it is its migration, like you were talking about. So the monarchs that we will probably start seeing them. There have been a couple monarch sightings already this year, but we will likely start seeing them in early May. Some people say it's kind of around Derby Day. It will depend on the weather from year to year. Of course, we had that other cold snap, hopefully.
Yeah, snow yesterday. Right? Yeah.
We're about done with winter because they obviously don't like that very much. They want it to be much warmer than that. So the monarchs that we will start seeing soon will likely either be the monarchs that have migrated to Mexico, spent the winter in Mexico, and are now headed on their kind of northbound migration. So if you see I guess raggedy kind of looking butterfly, it looks old, it has tattered wings, you know, it's just not fresh looking. That is likely a monarch that went all the way to Mexico and has come back and is looking for somewhere to lay their eggs. Stat.
Yeah, I'd look pretty rough too if I had to fly from Mexico to this far, right?
Yeah. Now, if you see a really fresh, bright orange looking monarch, and you probably wouldn't see one right now, but maybe sometime in May, I would expect you to start seeing them. That's going to be your first generation monarch for the year. So that is the offspring of the monarch generation that just did the migration. So the first generation for the 2021 year will be that fresh orange monarch that you'll hopefully start seeing in May. And so we will have monarchs that arrive, you know, next month, and they will stay here. Some will continue north, but some will stay here and they will breed. We'll have a couple more generations. So we'll have generation 2 and 3, and then that 4th generation for the year. So these are butterflies that are laying eggs. You know, the eggs are turning into caterpillars and turning into a chrysalis and then emerging as a monarch. And so this is happening 2 and 3 generations down. And then that 4th generation is going to be the generation that you see again coming through on that fall migration. And they will head back to Mexico in the fall. Like our biggest months are September. It starts mid-August. September is our biggest month for monarch migration. And then a little bit into October, you'll still see them. But those monarchs are going to be going to central Mexico. They overwinter in the Oyamel fir forest. So these are high elevation forests in Mexico, and they spend the winter there. And they're clustered together in all of these Oyamel fir trees. It looks like leaves because they're just all these orange butterflies clustered there. And then they will spend the winter there. And then start to come back, you know, again in the early spring. So that's kind of where we're at right now, if that makes sense. I know it's a lot, but
it's incredible is what it is.
Yeah,
it really is
really
to think about that small little butterfly makes that flight. I mean, we know about birds and waterfowl that migrate that far, but to think about a small little, you know, and a creature like that can go that distance is really cool.
I think one of the most amazing things to think about is that the monarchs that are making the migration, the ones that make that fall migration, have never been to this area in Mexico before. They've never seen these trees that they come back to each year. I mean, it's just amazing to think that this new generation finds it each year, the ones that their great grandparents found before.
Incredible. It really is. It's remarkable. So when you think about it, well, we've talked a little bit, you know, about habitat and, you know, kind of getting back to the Kentucky Wild program a little bit and just how members and sponsors of the program have helped with pollinator conservation. Laura, do you want to touch on this about sponsorships and certain projects and?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's start. I want to give a shout out to some of our really, really devoted Kentucky Wild sponsors that have made monarchs and other pollinators really the focus of how they want to help with Kentucky Wild. And the first one that I want to touch on, it was our very first corporate sponsor, is Boy Brewing. And they have these gentlemen at Country Boy are avid outdoorsmen, very, very avid hunters and anglers. But they also have a really, really big interest in helping wildlife in Kentucky as a whole. And at their tap room in Georgetown, they wanted, when they heard about this, they wanted to install what we call a Monarch Way Station. And that is a garden that has great nectaring plants and milkweed that would serve as a good place for monarchs to be year round, whether they were insects that were laying their eggs on milkweed so they would have something to eat, or whether in the fall when they have nectaring or have flowers that are in bloom that are good nectar producers. And then monarchs that are making that journey all the way to Mexico could stop up for a little pit stop at Country Boy Brewing. So what they did was worked with Michaela to select species that would be good for that garden. And then they went a step further and said, hey, well, how about we just invite Kentucky Wild members, if they would like to come and help us install these plants, and they can learn about what plants are good, how to arrange them in the garden. Michaela gave a fantastic workshop there at the tap room, and then they gave everybody a tour. So it was a lot of fun that day. And Country Boy continues to be one of our most active sponsors with that. So another one of our very active sponsors is Columbia Gas. And they are one of the stakeholders that are that Michaela mentioned earlier, one of our big players in the Monarch Conservation Plan. They are working very hard on their gas line right-of-ways to try to convert the vegetation that is there into something that can be useful for pollinators like the monarch butterfly. And they have gone beyond wanting to just look at areas that they have management over in their right-of-ways, and they offered to provide high-quality native plant seeds specifically blended for pollinators to use in other areas. And this is a shot of our field at our Fish and Wildlife headquarters in Frankfort, Kentucky. And Columbia Gas purchased enough seed for us to do a little over 10 acres of plantings here at headquarters. And so that is a location that is, believe me, much more beautiful than when it started. And it is certainly much more friendly to pollinators and small mammals and songbirds and birds of prey that come and hunt in that area. They use this area, and it's a place that we can go now when people come and we need to do some training on monarchs and pollinator gardens. We can use this as an example outdoor space to show folks. And so it's put a lot of great habitat on the ground for us, and we are very thankful that Columbia Gas made a commitment to do that habitat improvement, not only on their own lands, but also here as a place for us to show folks at headquarters. Another one of our partners that is heavily involved again in the Monarch Conservation Plan is East Kentucky Power Corporation. And they, very similarly to Columbia Gas in as far as how they maintain their right-of-ways, East Kentucky Power is maintaining right-of-ways under electric lines. And so what they did was approach us about areas where we could collaborate together, where their right-of-ways would cross over our wildlife management areas. And we found a perfect spot at Grayson Wildlife Management Area in Carter County. East Kentucky Power was doing a right-of-way rebuild, and not only did they offer to purchase over 20 acres worth of native plant seed to reseed back in, they helped our wildlife biologists go through that area, feather some of the edges along the right-of-way, remove some woody debris that wasn't even necessarily under their right-of-way. It was just to help our folks make a better area there for wildlife. And this is just a shot of the area after year one. I mean, it had such a phenomenal response in that right of way. And in addition to this, it worked so well. They're doing a similar project on another one of our wildlife management areas at Lake Cumberland. And this one is just now, Michaela, I think I'm right, just now they got the seed and it's ready to go. So it's not planted yet. It's kind of an in progress. But East Kentucky Power has purchased enough of that seed to do 20 acres at Lake Cumberland, WMMA as well. And they've also gone a little bit of an extra step and collaborated with us to produce some pollinator seed packages for us to distribute at different events that we do with the Kentucky Wild Program. And these are little seed packets that we hand out at Salado and at different events that we go to, so people can take a little packet full of pollinator wonderful plants and plant it in their own backyard. So we are just really, really excited about the response from these sponsors. They are very generous with their time, very generous with their resources. and are really making a difference on the ground by helping us put habitat in place that's going to benefit pollinators and a lot of other animals that use this kind of habitat.
Oh, I missed the, let me share this one too. This shows the Lake Cumberland.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, it's not quite as scenic as some of the other ones, but that's okay. We're just getting started on that, so that's all right. But you know, our sponsors have been able to do this, and certainly for their respective industries and companies, they are making environmental concerns something first and foremost that they want to support. But I don't want to leave our members behind here too. When our membership dollars are going in and coming in, we try to divide them up over the different programs so we can kind of spread out the good for whether we're talking about birds or reptiles and amphibians or freshwater mollusks. We have used some of our membership dollars to do things specifically for pollinators as well. And we have purchased bulk seed, that same native plant seed, that benefits pollinators, and we have done some additional plantings at headquarters. We've also been able to purchase very, very, very small milkweed plants, 2 or 3 different species. We have to individually plant those into the ground. We have done that as well at our headquarters location. There's some pictures of that there in the center. These are the seed packets there on the bottom left. These are examples of the seed packets that we bought them in our first year with membership dollars, and then the second year they were produced for us by East Kentucky Power Cooperative. We've also used membership dollars to purchase insect capturing nets. You can see some of those leaning up against our truck. We have used those in our surveys and tagging. We've also used those on some of our wildlife member wildlife experiences. Sorry about that. And the bottom right, we even purchased Monarch tags. And this is something that Michaela might talk about here in just a bit, but when these monarchs, these amazing insects are making this hundreds miles of journey to Mexico, we take the opportunity to try to catch them and tag them in the event that someone finds them. We've been able to learn quite a bit about the paths they take to Mexico. So all of those things were purchased there with membership dollars, and we're very, very thankful to our members that we were able to have the resources to do that.
What information is on the tags, Laura?
Well, Michaela, why don't you answer that? You're our Monarch tag specialist.
So I was going to try to direct you towards the picture. If you can maybe see on the very bottom of the tag, there is an 8-digit code. And so that's kind of a unique identifier to each monarch that you tag. There's also in the little red section on the tag, it has monarchwatch.org. And so Monarch Watch is the group that, or they're the nonprofit that runs the tagging program. And then on, I think on the top, I'm not sure, I can't remember what the other final piece of information is on the tag, but all of that links to your tagging information that you submit to Monarch Watch. So we will go out and tag, and we'll write down the date that you captured the monarch, if it's a male or a female monarch, where you captured it. And so we submit all of that to Monarch Watch with the different tag codes listed by all that information. And so if someone does find that monarch again and submit it, then they can pull up, where it was tagged from.
So, we've talked a lot about membership, whether that's corporate, personal membership, but you as our watchers at home can do lots of these different things, whether that's reducing your mowing, you want to talk a little bit about what you could do at home, whether that's planting or Monarch Way Station, things like that are directly related to monarchs?
Yeah, so I think kind of there's 2 sides to things that you can do with monarchs, and I think the main one I'm going to talk about first is like Laura mentioned, the Monarch Way Station program. She did a good job describing what that is. So it's a location that has both the nectar plants and the milkweed plants that monarchs need throughout their life cycle. So the milkweed plants that the caterpillar is feeding on in that photo. And then of course the adults need nectar resources. And so the importance of these monarch way stations are when monarchs are moving, on their migration throughout the landscape, as many of those little dots they can have where they can stop and, fuel up are going to make their migration just that much more successful. So if you do have space that you could carve out in your garden, planting milkweed and nectar plants, and if you can, creating a monarch way station is one of the best ways to help monarchs. And I was going to talk about, what kind of the best case scenario monarch way station looks like. And so I have another slide if you'll flip to it. There was some research out of the University of Kentucky. This was Dr. Adam Baker and Dr. Dan Potter. And so they wanted to look at, lots of people are planting these monarch way stations, putting in these gardens. And if you're going to do that and you want to kind of think about what's the best way to set it up in your garden, if you look at their diagram that they made here, they recommend, based on what they found in their research, is these little green circles are all your milkweeds. So kind of putting your milkweeds on the outside edges of your garden are going to help adult monarchs that are looking to lay eggs kind of hone in on those plants and find them a lot quicker. And so they've got their plants a little bit spaced apart in that diagram. If you really want to go, extra with it, you can add mulch to help them really stand out and hone in on those plants. And then they have examples of their nectar plants in the middle of the garden there. So there's some good examples. You've got the Joe Pieweed, ironweed, indigo, that sort of thing. There's also bee balms, purple coneflowers, prairie coneflowers, different fall blooming asters. I could name a ton of nectar producing plants, but I also wanted to point out that I have this pamphlet on our website. It's a Wild for Monarchs brochure, and Wild Ones, some of the people that work on trying to promote native plants, they helped us this is really their pamphlet that we helped edit for the Kentucky Monarch Conservation Plan. And so this is up on our website, and it has a whole host of different planting ideas that you can't read now, but it's up on our website under the Monarch Butterfly tab to give you an idea of what you can plant in your own yard that will help monarchs and pollinators. And one of the most important things to consider when you do have that garden that you're creating, if you can get something that's blooming in spring and then something blooming in summer and something with a fall bloom period, that more than any specific species is going to, help your garden be the most beneficial it can be for monarchs and pollinators. And if you will put the other slide back up, I also wanted to talk about some of our different monitoring options that you can do. So, not everyone may have space for a garden. Not everyone has access to a garden where they can plant things, but that is okay. You can still help with monarch research and conservation. And you can do that because there are so many different programs out there that these different organizations have put together to help with monarch monitoring. And so all of these logos that you see are from different monitoring programs. The top there, Journey North, is probably the easiest one. So if you're out and you see a monarch butterfly or you see an egg or a caterpillar, you can go to their website, journeynorth.org, and you can log that you saw that monarch. And that's one of the best ways that I use to track, when monarchs are coming into the state. I personally have not seen a monarch yet this year. I'm really excited to see one, but I have looked on Journey North and I can see that other people have posted pictures and they have shown that they have seen adult monarchs. So I know that there's been sightings here. So that's kind of one of the easiest ways to get involved with some of the community science monitoring options. There's also things, the tagging, monarchwatch.org, I mentioned that, and then Project Monarch Health. I kind of lump those two together a little bit because those are the two programs where you're physically going to be going out and catching monarchs on the wing, and you'll be, either applying a tag for Monarch Watch or with Project Monarch Health, you'll be sampling them for OE. It's a protozoan parasite that monarchs can get. And when I say sampling, don't worry about it. You're just sticking a little sticker on their abdomen for a second so it doesn't harm the monarch or anything. There's also the Monarch Larva Monitoring Project, which is in the green circle, the MLMP. That's going to be a good monitoring program if you have a small garden and you want to look for either eggs or caterpillars throughout the season. So kind of throughout spring through fall, you'd be recording and submitting the information to them. If you're wanting to look at your small garden and see if monarchs are using it. And with all of these, or some of these, I guess I should say, that one and the Monarch joint venture, the integrated monarch monitoring program, there's a lot of them, but both of those are ones where if you're not seeing monarchs out, you can still record data and they're interested in that sort of thing. But the integrated monarch monitoring program, the IMMP, is through Monarch joint venture, and that is one where if you're wanting to monitor kind of a large swath of habitat, you have an acre or more, and you're wanting to either look at whether adult monarchs or caterpillars and eggs are in your larger way station, that is a really good program to use. So all of these have websites that you can go to. Just Google any of those names we've talked about, and you'll be able to register and get more information about each one of those. But there really is a ton going on with monarchs, so you don't necessarily have to go one way or the other. You can either do the gardening, you can monitor the garden that you've planted, or if you just want to look for monarchs and record that you've seen them, Journey North is a great one to do that.
We had a lot of success last year with doing a couple of these monitoring events as part of our Kentucky Wild member experiences. And so we had a lot of success with those last year, and we intend to be able to do those again this year. We did some of the OE sampling with Project Monarch Health out at the Grayson Wildlife Management Area site. And then we've done for the past 2 years now, we have gone out in either late September or early October with some of our Kentucky Wild members, and we have captured monarchs migrating through using Perryville Battlefield and a location there that's been planted for pollinators. And it's a lot of fun. It's exciting. And even when it was really hot outside, we had members running around with butterfly nets, having a really, really good time. So we're hopeful that we will be able to do those experiences again this year too.
Fantastic. Well, go ahead, Gabe.
I was going to just say, so as we transition, we've talked a little bit about this. No, we've talked a lot about it back and forth, but join. Somebody tell me how you join, what that looks like, how does your sponsorship go, and kind of the details of joining and what that looks like.
Okay, joining is super easy. So what I'm going to do is direct you to our Kentucky Wild website. It is fw.ky.gov/KYWild. And on that website, you will see our current projects, and it also explains our sponsorships and all of our membership levels. And because it's Earth Day, we're going to do something special for anybody that is interested in joining, or maybe if you're already a member and you want to renew your membership. No matter what membership level you choose to join at, you will get one of these wonderful Kentucky Wild, I Support Wildlife t-shirts. You need to go to fw.ky.gov/KYWild, and under join, you enter the promo code Earth Day, EARTHDAY, and then we will get your membership packet out to you just as soon as we can, including one of these really awesome t-shirts. All of us are Kentucky Wild members, by the way. All 4 of us are Kentucky Wild members and love the t-shirt. Love the t-shirt.
And they're a fantastic shirt, I got to say.
I know, it's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, make sure you join. Laura touched on that. We have that promo code. That promo actually is good today, but it runs through the end of the month, right? But it's also important that get your membership by going through our actual fw.ky.gov website and the licenses. But if you want to take advantage of the Earth Day special and get this shirt, you need to go through that direct link. I've typed that into the comments in the YouTube link. So for people there that want to see that, it is there. So we'll make sure that you're aware of that one. And encourage everybody to join and reach out and get involved in this awesome program. So one thing I'd like to do, if we can, is transition. We've got a few questions from some of our viewers. I'd like to read those real quick, if that's okay. So we have one question. What kind of field work do you do to help monarchs and other pollinators? I think we kind of touched on that some. So anything else you'd like to go back and revisit that we didn't cover on direct field work for monarchs and other pollinators?
I think maybe the one that I didn't mention is that, well, I guess we did touch on most of the monitoring. I do the integrated monarch monitoring program. So the larger, the kind of larger area one that I was talking about with one of our WMAs, Cedar Creek Lake WMA. And then another related to monitoring thing that we do is collecting data for the monarch conservation database. Now, this isn't as much in the field, so it's not as exciting as getting out and, you know, getting to monitor monarchs in person, but I do collect data from all of our different stakeholders and submit how many, you know, how many acres or how many different management practices that people have done to benefit monarchs in the state. And so that's a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service run database. So that helps us, along with our monitoring efforts, track kind of, you know, how much is being done for monarchs.
Gotcha. So I see one of our viewers pointed out, we were talking about the monarch tag. They said the top of the tag is the website address on how to go and look at. Well, we'll look that up. So we missed that part of it. So thank you.
Website address. Yeah.
Folks who are active in that. So thank you for watching. So also we'll point out, you know, we've talked also a lot about this tonight. Today is Earth Day. When you think about Earth Day, a lot of people want to plant a tree. I challenge you to think about doing something different. Plant some monarch habitat, plant some pollinators, plant some flowers. You know, trees are cool and they're special, but you know, a lot of our species that are in peril need grasslands, need flowers for this. So, you know, do your part. Earth Day is about the celebration of Earth, whether that's planting a tree or planting different habitat. But think about that and encourage folks to do something for the environment today.
So one thing to keep in mind with that, real quick. So a lot of folks go to the nursery in the spring and pick out flowers or plants or trees. Ask the professionals there which ones are native to Kentucky, which ones can attract the species that you'd like to attract. Definitely lean on them for their knowledge. But I mean, there's plenty of resources online, books galore, all of that kind of good stuff can steer you in the right direction there.
And then, you know, one other thing I think that more on the national front that I want to hit as we wrap up is that, you know, being Earth Day, we had some exciting news out of Congress today. There is an act that was introduced. It's called Restoring America's Wildlife Act, or RAWA. Would any of you like to speak to that, or what that is kind of working through the process and what that could do and what it might mean to Kentucky?
I definitely would love to. Absolutely, because this, you know, if you haven't heard anything else that we said, I hope you've listened to every word.
Yeah.
But this Recovering America's Wildlife Act, if this goes through, this is going to be the biggest piece of, you know, I'm going to say when this goes through,
Right.
It is going to be the biggest piece of conservation legislation in 50 years. It's huge. You know, wildlife, it's not just in Kentucky, but nationwide, globally, certainly, we're experiencing a wildlife crisis. I mean, we know that we already have some threatened and endangered species. We have some species like the monarch that used to be extremely common that are declining at some pretty upsetting rates. And scientists really are estimating that if we don't step in and do some really proactive conservation here for habitat and for some of these animals, we're looking at having about a third of our species become threatened or endangered in North America. And that's not where we want to be. We know as Americans, we have a high value on our wildlife resources. So, the idea behind Recovering America's Wildlife Act is to look to the states and the wildlife professionals that are in each of the states. We know wildlife conservation can work if it's done correctly. We know that. And the problem is that we have a lot of work to do, but we don't have enough funding to work with. Now, right now, Congress mandates that each state fish and wildlife agency maintain what's called a state wildlife action plan. And hang with me here, I know it sounds a little bit dry, but this state wildlife action plan is developed by all of the land management agencies and non-governmental organizations, universities. They all put their best minds together and take a long, hard look at the scientific evidence behind what is the state of our wildlife in each state. And we're looking at the species that we have. We're looking at what their specific threats are to their populations and what actions are needed to either stabilize or recover those animals. And in Kentucky, we've identified over 300 species that we consider in greatest conservation need. And so knowing that and knowing that we have a limited amount of funding, we have to prioritize where we can do the most good on the landscape, where we can work together with other land managers. Okay, so we have that in our plan, but what we don't have is the money to do it. What Recovering America's Wildlife Act will do will dedicate $1.3 billion annually to state fish and wildlife agencies across the country. And in Kentucky, our portion of that would be about $18 million a year. So if you can wrap your mind around $18 million a year that we could use to implement our state wildlife action plan, that's what it's intended to do. And for us, what we're talking about doing is wanting to restore and improve habitat. If we can do that, we can help a lot of species in one swath. It's not just single species management. This is recovery. This is taking habitat that might already be there and improving it, creating habitat in areas where there isn't suitable habitat now, not just on our land. We're talking about waterways too. This is terrestrial and aquatic species, but we want to make habitat improvements. We want to mitigate invasive species. We want to do things to stop wildlife disease. There are wildlife diseases like white nose syndrome in bats is one example that we have got to get ahead of. And we want to do things that are going to help reduce our water pollution and deal with climate change. You know, there are some lofty goals, but as Kentuckians, you know, we know the value of nature. We value our resources. We enjoy outdoor recreation, and our overall health and clean air and water is important to all of us. So when Recovering America's Wildlife Act passes, it will be the biggest conservation funding bill in 50 years. It has bipartisan support. It is our responsibility as Kentuckians, I think, to support this piece of legislation because it will be a game changer for us. And if anybody wants to find out more about that, they can look at ournatureusa.com is the place that you can go to look. You can find Kentucky's fact sheet on there and specifically how we would look to use these funds when they come to Kentucky. So it's an exciting day for Earth Day. This could not be coming at a better time, and it will really be a game changer for us when this goes through.
So, you know, if you look at that website and you're informed and you support this, what we encourage folks to do is reach out to your U.S. representative and U.S. senator. You know, it's in the House right now, so that would be your representatives. But if it supports, we encourage you to reach out to all your Kentucky representatives. If we have some of you viewers that live in another state, look for your representatives in your state. Reach out to this, like Laura talked about. This could be huge for what we do at Fish and Wildlife, and for all Kentuckians to help benefit in your way of life and natural resources. So we're really excited about it tonight. You know, a little off topic for us to talk about federal legislation, but when you see what the dollars could do nationally in Kentucky, it really is a game changer for what we do, and specifically what you guys work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and the monies that are coming in with Kentucky Wild will be a very complementary part of that Recovering America's Wildlife Act, because, you know, with funding, states have to put up their own funding too, and Kentucky Wild is one way that we're going to do that. We know the constituency and the thoughts behind Kentucky Wild are wanting to help these creatures. We've got and we've got a lot of very passionate members, so we're looking forward to having this come to pass.
Well, Michaela, Laura, thank you very much. This was fun tonight. I enjoyed this conversation. I enjoyed talking about these things. We got a lot of cool things going. both here in Kentucky and also nationally, kind of wrapping that up with RAWA. So we thank you for coming on, sharing your experiences, and ultimately thank you for what you do. I know you have a high task of managing all the different species and looking out for them. And a lot of that kind of goes unnoticed, but we want to say thank you. I know our members and our Kentuckians all appreciate for what you do. And best of luck in all your field work, and enjoy your time in the field soon.
Yeah, thank you all so much, and happy Earth Day, everyone.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Help us keep Kentucky wild.
There you go.
Thank you
So
all.
Kevin, kind of wrapping up a couple things. One thing I'd like to point out is if you're around Frankfort, come to Salado. Salado is our education center. We have a pollinator exhibit. We also have a hive of honeybees where you can come and check those out. So a neat opportunity to do that. I really will leave you with the last couple thoughts is, we're blessed as Kentuckians. We talked about that on how high of a species diversity we have in the state. However, a lot of those animals need some help. And we heard from these folks tonight about that. And it's important that we do our part of conservation. We're just not about hunting and fishing, but all the different resources that our state has to offer. So be a good steward of that resource. Stop mowing, cutting back on that, get involved in Kentucky Wild, plant some flowers that are both pollinator friendly, and do the best we can for the environment. And really, being it's Earth Day, I gotta quote Dr. Seuss. I love Dr. Seuss, and my kids love him. And my favorite one is the Lorax, and quote from that: "Unless someone like you cares an awful lot, nothing is going to get better. No, it's not." So that's what I will leave with you tonight is Dr. Seuss and the wise words of wisdom that he has to say for us.
Outstanding. Well, to kind of wrap things up, we want to thank you, viewers, for joining us tonight, and hope you enjoyed the conversation, and just the information that Laura and Michaela have was just it's incredible. I hope to get some of their coworkers on future installments of Conservation Conversations. They work with some amazing creatures and critters, and do great work. So if you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button at the top right of the YouTube page, and then select the bell to receive notifications of new content from the Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. We'll be back here in a couple weeks on May 6th for another installment of Conservation Conversations. And Gabe, I think we're going to highlight elk in the Kentucky Elk Program.
Yep.
So we will see you all then. Have a good night. Thanks again, and happy Earth Day.